I was talking to somebody this week who had done a eulogy at her mother's funeral, and she had a workmate come along in support of her, someone who didn't actually know her mother. And this person told her that she did such a good job of the eulogy that he felt like he knew her mother by the end of it. So I thought today, I want the purpose of this talk to be such that you know a bit more about God's character by the end of it. Most of you will remember that we've been working through the Minor Prophets, and we're going to have a look at Zephaniah today, so if you please turn there in your Bible. The Book of Zephaniah tells us something about the character of God. Zephaniah wrote it in 630 BC, and the purpose was to demonstrate God raising up Zephaniah to warn the people of the coming judgment against them and to encourage them to turn from their sins and repent. So the themes are, respectively, judgment and deliverance. Just a bit of background. The kingdom of Israel, which was unified under King David, became divided because of the sin of his son Solomon, who set up Asherah poles and places to worship other gods so that he could please his wife. As a result, God allowed Israel to be divided into the southern and the northern kingdom. And the book of Zephaniah is a prophetic narrative written before the fall of Judah in the southern kingdom. According to Zephaniah, the people back then, as you see so many times in the scriptures, were pretty wicked people. They were living pretty wicked lives. In chapter 1 verse 4, it talks about them practicing satanic rituals. In chapter 1 verse 9, it says they were violent and deceitful. In chapter 3 verse 1 and 2, it says they refused to acknowledge God or his warnings, and they were complacent in that they saw other nations, i.e. the northern kingdom, being wiped out, but they did not think that it would happen to them. In chapter 3 verse 3 to 4, that talks about people who abused their leadership positions. And in chapter 1 verse 12, it says they did not care about their sin. Lastly, in chapter 1 verse 18, it says they put their trust in anything but him and worshipped other gods. One of the idols, one of the gods, non-entities in fact, that they worshipped was called Molech. And to give you a bit of an idea about the things they were doing at the time, I just wanted to talk a bit about the demands of being a follower of Molech. Subservience to Molech was supposed to ensure financial prosperity, and the requirements was that you'd sacrifice your children. So Molech was depicted, I'm not sure if we've got a picture, I did have a picture. Molech was depicted as a giant bronze statue of a man's body with a bull's head. Molech had outstretched forearms that made a kind of a ramp to a hole in the abdomen, and a fire was lit in and around the statue, and babies were placed in on the statue's arms or in the hole. You can see the giant statue and made of bronze being heated up, putting children in the statue's arms. And Plutarch, a Greek philosopher, wrote about the sacrifices associated with Molech. But with full knowledge and understanding, they themselves offered up their own children, and those who had no children would buy little ones from poor people. Meanwhile, the mother stood by without a tear or moan, but should she utter a single moan or let fall a single tear, she had to forfeit the money, and her child was sacrificed nevertheless. And the whole area before the statue was filled with loud noise of flutes and drums. Took the cries of wailing, so that the cries of wailing shouldn't reach the ears of the people. So this was an example of the kinds of things that God was wanting to wipe out. The sin was extreme. Take it off now. God was very patient with them, but at this point, God's patience had run out. Gosh, you look at that and you think, wow, that is really intense. But are we any better as a people today? The media is full of examples where, in some cases, kids are brutally killed by their parents. Just last week, there was a story of a guy who gassed his entire family with carbon monoxide. And another case in Western Australia yesterday where a guy in Western Australia had killed his children and now he's in hospital with self-inflicted wounds. And of course, most of us remember the story of Daniel Morecambe. His parents went through torture not knowing where their son was when he'd been abducted off the side of the road. One of the things that struck me when I read through Zephaniah was that the people were fearful. In the case of wanting to sacrifice your own child, it was underpinned by a fear of not being in a good financial position for the future. The fear of not having enough wealth for the future made them go to extreme lengths. What are you afraid of? What are you fearful of? If you say nothing, maybe you'll change your mind after you hear this illustration. I am fear. I am the menace that lurks in the path of life, never visible to the eye, but sharply felt in the heart. I am the father of despair, the brother of procrastination, the enemy of progress, the tool of tyranny. Born of ignorance and nursed on misguided thought, I have darkened more hopes, stifled more ambitions, shattered more ideals, and prevented more accomplishments than history could ever record. Like the changing chameleon, I assume many disguises. I masquerade as caution. I am sometimes known as doubt or worry. But whatever I'm called, I am still fear, the obstacle of achievement. I know no master but one. Its name is understanding. I have no power but what the human mind gives me, and I vanish completely when the light of understanding reveals the facts as they really are, for I am really nothing. When you listen to that, you see that fear is actually multifaceted, and even though you might think, oh, I don't get scared, I don't have that classic fear response, but it masquerades in other areas of our life. In my work as a psychologist, most of the people who come to see me are fearful in some way. And the way I help them is to try and give them an understanding of why they're fearful. Take panic anxiety. So panic anxiety is the classic fight-flight response when you get a surge of adrenaline. And the design is that somebody's racing towards you with a knife. Flight response kicks in and it gets you ready to run away or fight back within a very short space of time. And so panic anxiety occurs when the fight-flight response gets switched on for whatever reason. When people come in, it's often shockingly changed their lives. They don't go outside their house, they might be terrified of going out socially. And some people, it's so bad that they even want to take their own life. Just by giving them a bit of understanding, just by giving them two things to tell them that even if you have a severe panic attack, it can't hurt you in any way. It will do nothing bad to your body unless you've got a pre-existing heart condition. And it usually subsides within about 15 minutes. When people know that, they often come back the next week saying, oh, I'm not afraid of it anymore. I've had no panic attacks this week. And it changes their life. What are you afraid of? Me? I've had many different fears in my life, I think. Fear of failure, where I ended up dropping out of uni previously because I thought, no, it's not going to work anyway. I'm not going to succeed. Fear of people not liking me. Fear that I'm not a good enough dad, father or friend. Fear that my children won't accept Jesus. Fear that I won't go to heaven. Fear that my prayers won't be answered. What's your fear? There was once this criminal who had committed a crime, and he was sent to the king for his punishment. The king told him he had the choice of two punishments. He could be hung by a rope or take what's behind the big, dark, scary door. The criminal quickly decided to take the rope. As the noose was being slipped on him, he turned to the king and asked, "By the way, out of curiosity, what's behind that door?" The king laughed and said, "You know, it's funny, I offer everyone the same choice, and nearly everyone picks the rope." So, the criminal said, "Tell me what's behind the big door." I mean, obviously, I won't tell anyone, he said, pointing to the noose around his neck. The king paused, then answered, "Freedom." But it seems that so many people are afraid of the unknown that they immediately take the rope. So how does somebody overcome fear? The irony is that in most cases you have to face your fear to overcome it. The best way to overcome a fear of spiders is to stay in the same room as a spider without running away. The best way to overcome a fear of heights is to go and stand on the edge of a cliff. The best way to overcome fear of a social situation is to look for more opportunities to hang out with your friends and family. If you don't remember anything else about this sermon, I just want you to remember this. God helps us to face our fears, and finding understanding in God will erase our fears. In Zephaniah, the people were afraid. They were letting fear rule their lives, and they were letting it stop them finding God. But God goes on to promise them in chapter 3, verse 14 to 17. He says, "Sing, daughter Zion. Shout aloud, Israel. Be glad and rejoice with all your heart, daughter Jerusalem. The Lord has taken away your punishment. He has turned back your enemy. The Lord, the King of Israel, is with you. Never again will you fear any harm." On that day they will say to Jerusalem, "Do not fear, Zion. Do not let your hands hang limp. The Lord your God is with you, the mighty warrior who saves you. He will take great delight in you. In his love he will no longer rebuke you, but will rejoice over you with singing." This is an amazing passage. For those of you who have daughters, in verse 14, it likens, God likens himself to being a father and to the people his daughter. For those of you with a daughter, you know what it's like when your daughters are happy. They sing, they shout. You know, when they're little, run around in the bedroom, you hear them singing, you hear them being happy. They're loud because they have no reason to fear. There's no reason to be quiet. In verse 16, it says that the fear, or rather it references fear being represented as hands going limp. There's nothing you can do when you're in fear. But God, the mighty warrior, saves you. God is present. He steps in to defeat our enemies as any one of us would our children. In verse 17, we see a father who takes great delight in his child through the expression of song. We sing to our kids in a time of happiness and to reassure them in times of upset and trouble. With those of us who have a half-decent voice anyway. More depressing. But just that reference of the children being like a daughter is very, very powerful. It's an expression of God's character and an expression of his love for us and for the people. The theme of the book of Zephaniah is judgment and deliverance. And the Israelites back in Zephaniah parallel with us in the sense that God promised to deliver them from their sin, and God has made the same promise to us today. Again, the solution to dealing with our fears comes from wisdom and understanding that is available to us through Jesus. In 1 John chapter 4 verse 16 it says, God is love. Whoever lives in love lives in God and God in them. This is how love is made complete among us, so that we will have confidence on the day of judgment. In this world we are like Jesus. There is no fear in love, but perfect love drives out fear, because fear has to do with punishment. The one who fears is not made perfect in love. The amazing thing about Jesus is that he went through everything that is common to man. Different things are going to impact different people about what Jesus did when Jesus went to the cross. The thing that really impacts me is Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, where he's there praying, and it talks about in some passages where great drops of sweat like blood was dripping from him. And to me, I kind of see that as an intense panic attack, where Jesus was overcoming his fear of death and praying to God to help him to do that. And that's really impressive. I kind of think, how easy would it have been for him just to say, sorry, I can't do this. But he went through and overcame that anxiety. He overcame that fear for you and for me. That really impacts me when I think of what happened then. People these days see God a lot more differently to what he actually is in regards to the biblical view that we have of him. For those of you who watch The Simpsons, God's depicted as a stupid, bumbling old guy whom Homer can, talk out of or reason over. People see God as someone who doesn't care about humanity because of the bad things that happen in the world. Or that they'd only believe in God if God fits their perspective of what they think God should be like. When you read the Bible, though, you get to know the true character of God. Whether you read about him in Zephaniah or the Gospel, you learn that the character of God is totally loyal, unfailing in his love towards mankind. A God who wants to wipe away your fears and to take your place and my place on Judgment Day, to offer you the chance of everlasting life. So that's the message. It's a short one. I hope you've learned something about the character of God today. Thanks very much.